that we migrated to from 7-zip, which we've used for a few years. But LZMA is better integrated with Unix systems, so that's a bit nicer, and that compresses better. So maybe that the Samba part in the eventual Syllable download will be 10 MB or maybe even a little less. But still, the downloads are now 65 megabytes or something, and I added a lot here, so it's going towards 100 MB, I think. And more, at least 10% of that will be Samba, so that's way too big, and that's why we didn't include it in the past. But on the other hand, it's an important package. And one criterion would be that once someone writes a Syllable GUI to configure it, that would really be the time to include it. But on the other hand, if you want to write such a GUI program, you need to have it installed, and it's easier if it's already in the system, so you can immediately start programming on it. And besides, it has command line tools that already work. If you want to run your own server, you're probably you don't really need a GUI tool to configure it anyway. It's a very well known and very well documented program, so it's useful to have it included without a native GUI, but it's way too big. But I put it in anyway because it's useful.
Could I use it for running Syllable desktop on a VM and then accessing the files through Windows?
On a what? Oh, on a VM.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. If you arrange for the networking to work, but it's usually very automatic to run a client system inside a VM. Then you usually get automatic DHCP network configuration. It's usually much harder to get a server to run within a VM, because then you really have to configure the networking yourself in a server mode. Mm-hmm. So that's a bit more work, and then you really need to know your VM system. But other than that, there's no problem to do that. Okay. Except that Syllable has always ran very badly on VirtualBox is a weird emulator. It's very popular now. I don't understand why, because it's a very weird emulator, and we've had a few reports that Syllable runs okay on it, but most people say it runs very badly, and I've seen that myself too. So Syllable used to be run on VMware several years ago, and it still runs very well on that. It has a video driver for VMware, and we've debugged VMware support over several years. It also runs well on QEMU, but I think I'm supposed to say QEMU, I don't know, but I call it QEMU. And but it depends on the emulator, and the configuration for server mode also depends a lot on the emulator, so you'll have to figure that out. But other than that, VirtualBox doesn't work anyway. It should work in the emulators that do work to begin with. Speaking of QEMU, it was very problematic to port that to Syllable Desktop. And it took us several years of trying, but before Syllable 066 we managed to do that. So since the release of 066 you can download and install QEMU, but it's really not that big. It's the package, the separate package is less than 2 megabytes, which I think is very. It's not really small, but I think it's very acceptable for an emulator, especially compared to all the alternatives. And so I really wanted to include that in a new release. So QEMU is included now.
So you can also run Windows inside QEMU.
Yeah. And I've got a few Linux ISOs with me, so if we have time I can try to show it.
I would suggest that we have a break within now and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And after that we have some time.
Yeah, maybe I'll finish these this overview first. There are several fixed packages still in here.
There's a stream editor also. Down.
Stream editor?
It's SAD.
Oh yeah, the standard set, yes. But it's not I thought you meant a video stream editor or something, or this is just a text stream editor.
The famous Unix.
Yeah, the tool, the Unix tool that's used everywhere. So yeah, it's not something that we really would want in the base system, but so much stuff uses it also within Syllable that we must include it. And it used to, I think it used to be in system resources because it was critical, but I think I found out that it's not really critical for starting the system, so it's, in any case at the moment it's in resources, not in system resources. But there are two very standard things, set and grep.
Grep, okay.
Grep.
Famous
See,
grep.
grep is also here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's also not in system resources, but I think one of them is used in some shutdown routine. If you delete these and you shut down, then it can't find all its processes to kill. It's a bit weird. It's weird that Syllable would depend on it in that way. And I think we should replace that with some more native code sometime, but there are some vague dependencies on sed and grep within the Syllable system,
The famous target table.
so they must be included.
And grep is also.
Grub is really the bootloader, so we really need that. But grub is shared between here the package and the boot package. So the boot code is elsewhere in the boot directory, and this is the remaining part of the package where the installer is. So if you want to install grub, I think it's an sbin, yeah, here grub install. If the installer uses grub install to install the bootloader. So this is really only needed at installation time. But to be complete, it's also in the running system. So you could use it to install another partition with Syllable from this running Syllable, for example.
Okay.
But it said grub MD5 crypt. Is that can you encrypt it or something?
Yeah, no, yeah. That's just one of the tools in grub.
Okay.
But I don't think we want to go into that much detail.
But this
now.
is still the Syllable, the old this is not the new grub.
This is grub 1, yes.
Yeah.
Grub 2. We needed a file system implementation, a Syllable AFS file system implementation. And the one in grub 1 is copyrighted by Kurtz from Atheos, Kurtz Cowan. And he doesn't want to assign the copyright to the Free Software Foundation, and then the FSF and GNU doesn't want to integrate it in grub. So we have to maintain a huge patch, which has also been a lot of work over the years. But grub 1 development has stopped half a decade ago. And someone several years ago wrote an new AFS driver for grub 2, but the problem is that this part, the user part of grub, hasn't been ported yet from grub 2, and it's more or less the same patch that's needed as in grub 1, so we can't run the installer yet. But we thought that we could boot Syllable with grub 2, and just last week I tried it on this new laptop from Linux Mint, which has grub 2 anyway. So we had a machine with Mint, with grub 2 and Syllable Desktop as multi-boot. So I tried to boot Syllable Desktop directly from grub 2. and even that doesn't work yet. The AFS driver is included, but the boot order is wrong. It looks like the kernel starts too early. The kernel starts before grub has loaded all the support modules, because grub needs to load the file system driver before the kernel can load. But you need to load the file system in the kernel. So grub needs to load the kernel, then stop it. Then grub needs to load the file system and other drivers in the kernel, and then the kernel needs to continue with the file system loaded to load from the partition. And it looks like it continues loading before the AFS driver and the other modules are loaded by grub. And so there's a multi-boot specification that grub is based on, and Syllable uses the multi-boot specification to boot. And it looks like grub 2 changed its multi-boot behavior, because it Syllable works with grub 1, but it goes wrong with grub 2. So there's another external upgrade. That's a lot of work to adapt to Syllable to stay modern. So the biggest problem is fixed, the AFS driver, but are still 2 problems to fix before we can really switch to grub 2. Okay, I'll have a quick look for modules that I fixed here. Most of the fixes are in the system resources, actually. Oh yeah, I fixed ncurses. There's in the last development build, ncurses wasn't built right. It was halfway between dynamic and static libraries, but dynamic libraries don't work yet. So I had to recompile it again for static libraries, and then compile a few things on top of it that wouldn't build otherwise. So ncurses is fixed, but that is by building it from source. So there are several packages in here that I built from source to fix them or to add them. So ncurses is fixed from source. Readline is also fixed from source on top of ncurses. There are all weird dependencies. Several things broke because readline it was broken through readline, but the weird thing was that readline itself was working, but it broke other packages. And the strange thing is that readline was broken because ncurses was broken.
But what?
So readline should have buffered the dependency between those other packages and ncurses. So because readline worked, the packages on top of it should also work, but they didn't, because the distortion in ncurses leaked through readline into those other packages, although they should have been shielded from it by readline.
What does readline?
Oh, that's if you go into a terminal and you want to get your previous command back because you want to give it again, or you want to edit it, then you can call up a previous command, and that's what readline does. It gives you line editing. You can edit a line, and there's a separate library in it which is called lib history, and that makes that you can recall previous command lines. And then you want to edit those previous command lines, and that's what the readline library
So
does.
when I do Control R in the terminal,
yes,
then I start readline.
that's lib history.
Okay.
You don't start it; it's already preloaded, but it loads when you load the terminal. So those 2 are fixed from source. SDL, as I said, SDL image, yeah, but I'll handle the new things later. First, I'll do the fixes. As I said half a year ago, last year, I fixed SDL image and libjpeg, but those are newly built from source. So those are fixes. XPDF is broken. XPDF has a library, that's the resource part, and the application part is in the applications directory, the application I showed before. So both of them were broken. The application was broken because the library was broken. So both of them I copied in from binary from 066. So the XPDF library is a fix, and the XPDF application is a fix. So those are the fixes, and then there's a number of new resources, new ports in here, and I'll continue with those after the soup break.